Hi everyone, and welcome to another instalment of our Inclusion and Belonging podcast. Today we're talking about International Women's Day, an annual event which is celebrated on the 8th of March every year. This year's theme is Break the Bias, and we're discussing all things bias today with our Women at Stagecoach employee network. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this International Women's Day podcast. Today, we're joined by four inspirational women. We're joined by Charlotte Wardrop and Heather Collins, who are employee network leads for Women at Stagecoach. And they're joined by Sharon by Palminster and Janine Summers, who are the co-chairs of the employee network.
Hi everyone, I am Charlotte Wardrop. I'm one of the co-leads for Women at Stagecoach, and really grateful for Sharon and Janine to be joining us today, so that we can chat all things bias and unconscious bias and women in work, and yeah, have a great conversation. So I'll pass to Heather.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Collins. I am a co-lead of the Women at Stagecoach Network, and I'm really looking forward to getting some good chat going with Sharon and Janine, because I think you're really inspirational women to have a chat with.
So Janine, if you could just let us know a little bit about yourself and your history with Stagecoach and otherwise, that would be great, please.
So hi everyone, Janine Summers. I am the new Regional Director for the North, taking over from the lovely Michelle Hargreaves when she retires. Very excited about joining the team and taking some stuff forward for Stagecoach. I joined Stagecoach about a year ago in the commercial team, so I've been looking after some revenue generating projects. But now I'm ready for my next step in Stagecoach, which is where my heart well and truly lies, and that's with people leadership. So I'm very excited to be starting the new job next week. And I'm equally excited being part of the women's network and how we can really push on and move our diversity numbers forward for the business.
That's great. Thank you, Janine. And Sharon, same question.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon by Palminster. I'm the Health, Safety and Environment Director for Stagecoach. I've been part of the Stagecoach family for about the last 8 years, and my job really does what it says on the tin. I look after, in my day job, all issues around health, safety and sustainability around, for Stagecoach. My role is very similar in this team as Janine's, is that I'm co-chair of the Women's Network, and I couldn't be prouder. When we were asked to volunteer for networks to chair them, this was the one I really wanted, so I was really happy. It's the one that I really got, and I get to work with some fantastic women in Stagecoach and men too on really promoting women in the workplace, which I think is essential to the future of our business and indeed all businesses.
That's great, thank you, Sharon. And as a male member and ally of the Women's Network, I completely agree there that it's fantastic to give such a great platform to our incredible women in this business, and also bring men to the table to join in that celebration as well. So thank you. Charlotte, I think we had some questions prepared for Janine and Sharon.
Yep, so if we crack on, so whether deliberate or unconscious, bias makes it difficult for women to move ahead. And knowing that bias exists isn't really enough. So we need action to level the playing field. So some of the questions that we'd like to pose to our co-chairs is, the first one, have you ever been in a situation where you feel like being a woman in a male-dominated workspace has actually been beneficial to you or your team as a whole? Janine?
Absolutely. So for most of my career, I've been one of a couple of women in a team. So I'm really used to working alongside men. So the great thing about being a woman in a male-dominated environment is about how you can start to see to put different perspectives on things for the men as well, and actually seeing things from a different way. And helping our men understand a bit more about empathy and compassion. And I feel like the benefits to the business are you've got that different way of thinking, you come at things from a different angle. Our men sometimes can have a very blinkered way of seeing things, And actually, what I would say is, from a high tenure business, which has been mainly men for many, many years, it is now our responsibility to make sure that we are talking to our men about why it makes such a great difference having a diverse workforce, and in particular our women, and what we can bring to the table. So for me, I've always felt able to be me. So I've been very lucky in that sense. But I know that not all women feel like that. So I think part of our role in the network is to try and help our women have a voice, create a bit of a sisterhood. So really, yeah, from a beneficial point of view, I've always felt like I've been able to work alongside our men, whichever men they are within the business as well, and help them understand why it does make great business sense to have women, and more women, within the workforce.
Thanks, Janine. And same question to you, Sharon.
So I would agree with everything that Janine said. My experience is really similar. I have always, through my whole career, worked in workplaces where the majority of my colleagues have been men rather than women, and quite often I've been the only woman in the room. So it's really, it can be a bit difficult then, can't it, to say what was the benefit of having me there. But I would say that the benefit that I have seen, as I have seen more women come through public transport, whether that be in our bus industry, our coach industry, trams, or in railways, and I've worked through them all, has been to bring those different perspectives into the workplace that Janine just talked about. The people we interact with, members of the public we interact with, our customers, our stakeholders, they all have women and men. So our perspective is only enhanced as a business, and our communities within our depots and within our teams is only enhanced by having as many diverse voices as we can get, because different perspectives are really important when you do really practical things like solve problems, or keep people's energies and spirits up when things are difficult, which we've all experienced over the last 2 years. So women and men bring those different perspectives and those very different skills and those very different ways of looking at life. So I think I've seen that benefit as I've seen more women come into the workplace, and indeed more diverse voices come into the workplace.
Thanks, Sharon. And it's really interesting, because I completely agree with everything that you've both just said about diverse teams are more productive and more efficient and are ultimately more successful. I'm a lot earlier on in my career, and I've had very different experiences. I've worked in HR where it's been fully women and there's been no male voices, and then I've worked in engineering and then in transport where it's been all men and no female voices. So I have found it quite challenging at times, where being the only woman in the room as a younger female, a new graduate, wasn't really able to have my voice heard, and then kind of realised that was holding me back, and had to make some changes to myself, my career choices, to try and better myself and better my career. But I think it's so important that we do realise that not all women will have that confidence either to walk into a room and speak in front of a room full of men and not be worried about what they'll think or say or the judgment that'll be made. How can we change that going forward? How can we make it a safe environment to bring more females into the business and have that allyship, like you said, Janine, that sisterhood that's quite clear from day one, that people, you don't worry about what the judgment's going to be. You can say what you want, and your voice should be heard, and these diverse opinions are so important. So yeah, how do you think we can do that, Sharon?
That's our challenge, isn't it? As the Women's Network, it's our big, bold goal to make everyone across all of the networks comfortable in the workplace and feel valued and engaged and feel that they have the opportunity to progress if they should choose to. That's the role of this network. And it's a great thing for us to be aiming at. I think there are a few things that I would, if I was looking back, I'm getting towards the back end of my career now. So I've seen a big progression since I started work in the early 90s in how workplaces operate and how people generally talk to each other and different, ways of interacting. But I would say to young women coming up through the workplace who maybe are looking for their voice, and I would equally say to our men and in the workplace who are listening to those young women, is that everybody's voice matters. And if you're a young woman, you matter and your voice matters. Women's voices matter in our workplace. So something that when I started, it took me a long time to get the confidence to understand that my voice mattered. I would encourage you to stand and say whenever you feel nervous about those interactions, that your voice matters and you have something to say. So that's really, really important. If men ask me the question, because a lot of men that I interact with will say, no, I don't hold any bias, or I'm not in a position. We always make people welcome, and it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. What I would say, and I do say to those men, is actually your own personal bias. We can talk about that and how you can get over that and on an individual basis. But imagine how you would feel if you were a lone man walking into a workplace that was absolutely full of women, and just try and put yourselves in the shoes of some of the women that you work with that are in the position where they're the only woman in that workplace, and have a bit of, thought about how you would feel and therefore the things that you can do to make that a more inclusive environment for the women that you work with. Us as a business, as Stagecoach, and our businesses within Stagecoach, the Women's Network, I think is super important, because what we can do then is for those women that are working in environments where they might be one or two women in the environment and want to build that. There's a really supportive network out there that can help you. So you do have female colleagues that are there within touching distance just through a screen. So I think it's a complex thing that starts with both us as individuals, but also the things that we do as an organisation to make sure that women feel that they have a really important role to play in Stagecoach and in public transport, and that it's a career that matters and brings them in and they can progress in.
Thank you, Sharon. And Janine, same question to you, really. I think it's just to try and understand what we can do to get more females in the business and help that diverse opinion.
So you've touched on quite a lot of good stuff there, Sharon, actually. And so, if we went back to basics, we need to look at our recruitment strategy. We need to look about the wording that we use, about how we attract women into the business. And I know that, Sharon, you just spoke about young women. It's all women as well. And I totally relate to what you've just said there, Charlotte, about confidence and just feeling a little bit out of sorts when you're in a room of people, mainly men. But also, I think that, I'm a really confident woman, and I've been in many a room with lots of guys. I've been at a conference with 200 people where I was the only woman. Didn't really bother me. But what I am conscious of is majority of women, that would be really, really daunting. And then you're on the back foot, and then you have this whole imposter syndrome about I can't do it. And, so the fact that we're now on this journey of we're recognizing, one, that we need more women, and two, that we need to support our existing women, and three, we need to bring more women in, is a fantastic way to start off a brilliant network for Stagecoach. And I think that, this we need to do that future thinking about how businesses benefit more from having that diverse thought process that Sharon touched on earlier on. And our female senior leaders really should be involved in championing our women as well. It can only be a good thing, this. So what I would say as well is our men are equally important to this business. So this isn't about, it's all about women and girls. This is about collectively working together to make Stagecoach a better place to work. Now, Sharon related your story to a man walking in a room. My story would be, you have a sister, a daughter, a wife, a niece. Imagine if they were that woman in that room and they came on that night and said, oh, Dad, I've just been in this room with a whole bunch of guys and I felt really uncomfortable. If you relate things in a storytelling way, then, you know, our men, it will help our men try to relate to these things a little bit better. We have to get more men allies. My suggestion would be every woman within our network buddies up with a man, and actually they start talking together, and then collectively we start to build this advocacy around the business to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, and we're all aiming for the same thing. I think it's a great thing. So we go back to basics, we look at how we recruit people, we're looking at our family leave policy, because that needs reviewing, and we really start to make a movement happen. And this is the beginning of what we're going to do here. So it's great that we've got so many advocates already, and yourself, Stuart, brilliant that you're on board. The more men we get on board, the better and faster we will move in this space. So yeah, I'm really excited about what we can achieve here, really.
Thanks, Janine. It's really interesting actually that you mentioned the male allyship, because I completely agree. I think that's so, to make change happen, and we can get into the theory behind it, but you have to have the insider and the outsider groups together. So technically the insider group is men in this case, and the outsider groups are women. Women on their own will never make change. Men have to be on board for that to happen. So I can't agree more. And I think that's a really interesting idea about the buddying up thing. I think that's something we should, as a women's network, take forward. So thank you for that. We'll definitely note that one.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Charlotte. And I think we've sort of touched on bias a little bit already. And this year's International Women's Day theme is Break the Bias. So I think it's important to find out, what does bias mean to you, Janine, and how can it really impact equality in the workplace?
So it's a really good question, actually. And I think that there's a misnomer about what bias might mean to different people. And I think, the bias here is probably we lean towards our men have got bigger voices, there's more of them, obviously, but how do we help those men look at things in a different way? So from a bias perspective, are they biased towards talking to just their male colleagues because they might think women wouldn't know the answer? We're strong, independent women here on this call. We know that we do know lots of answers, but for me, it's about communication, right? So I talked about storytelling and communication and explaining the why. So why are we doing this stuff? And it's a continual conversation about how do you put a different perspective on an answer to a question that you might normally think a man would know the answer to. So the bias for me is about men opening their minds to, actually, I'm going to ask somebody different than what I would normally do. And then we start to build on what they're doing for us. So yeah, from a bias perspective, it is about storytelling. It's about talking about what bias means to people, giving examples. But for me, and I'm fiercely passionate about communication, this is about talking, keeping the story alive, continual communication, but also checking back. So our men allies in the Women's Network, make sure that they have a voice on how we are positioning things with our men out there as well. So yeah, from a bias perspective, I think it is just trying to just broaden our mindset and start to encourage talking to more women and getting their perspective on things, and then the bias might start shifting. But let's face it, right, this is going to take a long time. It's a cultural shift, and it will take a while, but this is the beginning of something great. So I'm really happy that we're starting to embark on looking at things in a different way. But communication for me is absolutely critical to get that right, and keeping it going.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. It's not a quick journey. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but the important thing is that we're on the way. Sharon?
For me, there's a lot of conversation about bias, isn't there, in society at the moment and within our networks and everywhere. And for me, bias is really simple. It comes down to either being prejudiced towards a group of people or against a group of people or individuals, based on your own experience and your own personality, but also it can be gender based. It can be based in many different things. We're all individuals, right? So the cause of individual bias is very individual, whether that's to a group of people or away from a group of people. But undoubtedly, all of the science says is that we do tend to be more biased towards people that are like ourselves, because we tend to be more comfortable there. So these are really personal things, aren't they, for us as individuals? That's why it's so challenging as companies to affect real change, because on a large basis you have to talk to individuals about these things, don't you? Especially if, as we all have, unconscious biases towards lots of different things. So I think it's a really tough and challenging thing. Actually, as Janine talked about, there has to be storytelling in this and why it's so important. This is about communication, but it's also about not leaving groups of people, because what I don't want are men to feel who may be listening to this podcast, and I understand that maybe our allies are much more likely to be listening to this podcast than maybe others, but I would say really clearly to them, this is not about being anti-men. This is not about that at all. And I think sometimes the narrative around this can be swayed in that direction, can't it? We've seen that happen, and that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that actually we're challenging ourselves as women to think about our biases around, can we actually achieve great things, and can we progress in the workplace? And then we're challenging our male colleagues to really challenge themselves to see if they have any biases. So actually, the more that we can create a narrative and the more that we can create communication on this and give examples, really clear, simple examples of how those biases might actually play themselves out in the workplace, I think the better chance that we've got of making a real difference. Because I do absolutely agree with Janine in that these things take a long time. And let's look at the history of Stagecoach. I mean, the history of Stagecoach is we were co-founded by a woman. We've had really, really strong women leaders in this business who've been inspirations across the industries and wider in which we operate. So we've had that benefit of having women in our leadership. We've had a lot of women in our workforce throughout the whole time that we've been a business. So we're not starting from a 100% all male business. We're starting from a position where we've had strong female leaders and continue to have strong female leaders and continue to have really great females represented across all of our roles in Stagecoach. We just want them to be more. If we're over 50% in the wider population, why wouldn't we be at that point in the workplace?
Thanks, Sharon. And controversially, actually, we should really touch on the unconscious bias and where we think that started from. So when I was researching bias and unconscious bias in previous roles, I found it really interesting that 10, 20, 30 years ago, females, and whether rightly or wrongly, were the primary caregiver. They were maybe stay-at-home mums, and the men went off to work, and that was our society many years ago. So throughout the years, men and men and women have seen their mums potentially be primary caregiver, picking them up from school, cleaning the house, and whether that's right or wrong, interestingly, they then go into the workplace and because of their upbringing, potentially see that as it's different to them, and that creates an unconscious bias. So I find it really interesting, the whole unconscious bias and breaking the bias thing. It's something that we do need to do more as a business, and I'm sure that's something on our agenda that we should try and do more of. And sure, I think you've got something in the pipeline, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charlotte. I think it's really, as you touched on, there are so many influencing factors that can impact on bias. Through my research, I found there's over 200 different specific types of bias. So you talk about like affinity bias, unconscious bias is like an umbrella term. They can be impacted by societal, environmental, upbringing, like you touch on. A lot of these things that you inherit through your whole life, or even through genetics as well. The idea of affinity bias, or being attracted towards people, birds of a feather flock together, right? That well-known phrase. We're drawn to people who we look like, or who look like us. It comes from genetics a lot of the time, and these are things that were really useful a couple of million years ago when we were running away from Tyrannosaurus Rex and that sort of thing. But actually, nowadays, they're not quite as relevant, and that's why bringing the unconscious bias to the conscious is really important, so we can address it. There is definitely a school of thought that it's not relevant, or that bringing unconscious bias to the forefront of your mind actually compounds those biases and makes people more aware of them, and it doesn't produce equality. Personally, I disagree. We've actually just launched a suite of sessions, so development on demand. We've just launched 2 inclusive leadership sessions. One of them focuses on implicit bias, unconscious bias, and how to mitigate for that, and how to do that to promote business success. And I genuinely think it's really, really valuable. So I encourage anyone to get involved on those sessions personally.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting to do, and I'm looking forward to being on some of those sessions myself. A question that we will sort of end with, that I'm really excited to ask as well, personally, as a woman that is trying to climb that career ladder at Stagecoach, and as the women at Stagecoach lead, can we ask just for one piece of advice that you would give for women at Stagecoach that are wanting to progress in their career? Janine, you've had an incredible career. What advice would you give?
Okay then, so for me it would be about talking to your female colleagues, step out of your comfort zone. For the women who are really interested in progressing their career, is be bold, ask questions. I'm really keen on mentoring actually as well, so it's identifying some people who can help you have those right conversations. Sharon and I are here as huge advocates of pushing the female agenda forward. So I'm more than happy to talk to people and help open doors. But I think, it is about just being a little bit more bolder than what you are today. And for our existing women who are really comfortable doing what they want to do, and they're happy with that, it's about how do we create those safe spaces and environments for them to be themselves. I'm a massive believer in authenticity. I am really authentic myself, and it's really important for me that all of our women feel that they can be themselves in the workplace. So 2 things on a career level: reach out to someone a little bit more senior than yourself. And for our women who are not really bothered about progressing the career, it's about just creating those safe spaces and starting to get the conversations going. Sharon and I are here as well, and we'll make sure that your voices do get heard. And let's just take this forward.
Amazing advice. I am here where I am today in my position because I asked a question, and that is such incredible advice. Sharon, what advice would you give?
That is really strange because as you asked the question of Janine, I wrote down some notes, and they are very similar, my responses to Janine. So that's good, I think. For those women colleagues that want to progress in their career, I would say, and this comes from experience of myself and also recruiting women into various different jobs throughout my career, don't wait until you think that you're ready. Don't wait until you have 100% of the skills and the everything else that's on a role profile. My view is, as women, we tend to do that much more. I'm not good enough quite yet. I need to get a bit more experience. I need to get that qualification. Don't wait until that point. Give it a go. And I think that's my version of Janine's be bold. Step into it and really give it a go. And for women like myself who are in a job that they love and that actually this is really comfortable and don't have a big career path mapped out in the future, I would say that your voice really matters in that workplace. If you are in a workplace where there are fewer women, or you could be the only woman, that actually your voice really matters in that workplace. And sometimes we, as your kind of your sisters in the Stagecoach Women's Network, would want you to be courageous. And I always go back to what courage means, and what courage really means. It means to speak from the heart. So I would say be courageous when you're in your workplace. Be courageous enough to be yourselves as women, and be courageous enough to welcome other women into your working environment and really help them along. And that's it from me.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Sharon. That was really insightful. I didn't know that about the word courage as well.
Yes, it's good, isn't it? I think it is. When you really hear about courageous people, there are always people that are courageous enough to speak from a truthful place.
And just to put the lens of male allies and men at Stagecoach on it, and not to centre myself, I think it's so important that this isn't just about what women can do. I think it's really important to also state that this is all of us at Stagecoach, and we have an incredible pool of talent. We have incredible men within the business as well. So I just think it's really important that we bring men along on this journey with us as well. We need male allies. And I encourage anyone. It's an incredible community. I'm really proud to be part of this sisterhood, even if it is as an ally. I love that phrase. Thank you, Janine, for bringing that up. And I encourage people to get involved because it's so insightful. It's a really safe space, and I'm really grateful to be welcomed into it as well.
Thanks. Everyone, and thanks for inviting us on the call, Charlotte and Stuart. Your voice is really important to us as well, so I've loved hearing from you as well. And so yes, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you soon.
I just want to say this has been brilliant. I've loved talking to you all today about this really important subject. I'd like to end with saying, yes, come join us. Men, women, all come join our women's network. You'll be welcomed with open arms, and we're going to be doing some really great and exciting things. I'd like to finish by saying to everybody who's listening to this podcast, happy International Women's Day. Let's make this the year that we really do break the bias.
Thank you so much to Janine and Sharon for joining us today. That's been really insightful, and actually it's great to have these conversations because it means that we are talking about it. It's not a taboo subject, talking about women's networks and something that it does matter, and it's in our everyday life. So thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll do this again. And thanks everyone for listening. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you so much, ladies. Bye. It was amazing. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks to everyone for listening today. We hope you found this conversation interesting and insightful. If you'd like to get in touch directly with the Women at Stagecoach Network, you can email women@stagecoach.com. Thanks again for listening to today's podcast, and we hope to see you again next time.